All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Sprenger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I'm thrilled to have one of our very own JFK faculty members presenting today. Bill Waterman is here and has two very special guests with him this evening. So I will let him introduce them shortly. I'm just going to do a couple of brief housekeeping pieces. Remember, this webinar is being recorded and we are going to post it in our CTL resource guide webinar sections for internal use. And then if you do want to see the scrolling subtitle of this webinar, please hover over the bottom of your Zoom and select the CC option and hit show subtitle. If you don't want the subtitles to be there, you can hide your subtitles. Just have a conversation with me in the chat. I'll help you out with those logistics. And then questions are welcome. So please have any questions that you may have for today's presentation, pop them in the Q&A or the chat. We would love to hear from you. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with a day in the life of a paralegal. And I would like to turn this over to Mr. Bill Waterman.
Okay, great. Thank you, Emily. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Waterman. I teach in the faculty at the JFK Law School in the JD program and also our certified paralegal program that's part of JFK, where I teach about litigation and mediation and a little bit of substantive work in the field that I practice in called torts. And with me today, we have Janet and Jill, Janet Myers and Jill Gelster. Welcome, ladies.
Good afternoon, Mr. Waterman.
So what I wanted to just do is introduce both of you, because this focus of this seminar is really about you and your life as a paralegal. So what I'd like to do is have you each introduce yourselves, take a few minutes about explain an overview of your past work experience first before becoming a paralegal and litigation assistant. And then we'll talk about your past paralegal work and then current paralegal work. That's a mouthful. Let's start with Janet. Do you want to go first?
Sure, certainly. I'm Janet Myers. I've been working as a paralegal for a very long time. I started out as a secretary in a large corporation, kind of worked through the ranks there and kind of got bored with it and wanted to try something different. Landed on the paralegal program at St. Mary's. Luckily, I was able to acquire a job in the legal department at that corporation. And lucky for me, they ended up paying for my education to go. So that worked out really well. I spent probably 13 years at the corporation doing all kinds of things. I did a lot of incorporations, dissolutions. I ended up being the corporate historian. I computerized all the minute books. They brought in like 30 boxes of stuff from storage and said, have at it. So that was actually fun and kind of interesting. I like that component of it. Then I ended up in family law for a few years, but then I wanted to go back into the bigger corporate sector. So I'm now an insurance defense paralegal. So we're staff counsel, which means we are essentially working for the insurance company. And that's what I'm doing now.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And just for the audience's benefit, I have not asked Jill and Janet to talk about the specific place they work, but just we're talking more generally and broadly about where they're both working. Jill, tell us about your background before coming into the field and then where you landed.
Well, I was thinking about this when I woke up in the middle of the night. It's kind of frightening. I started, I have a degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater from Santa Clara University. And then I went on to get a graduate degree in gemology. So I have a GG. So I worked in the jewelry industry for a number of years. Then I moved on from there, doing a lot of volunteer work because of my theater background in community theater, which opened up learning about doing graphics work and that sort of thing. So I was doing programs and that type of work with computers. Then I moved into the association management field and did that for 13 years, where we're professional association management and conference planning, did conferences internationally for about 13 years. I also went off and joined a company called Leighton Stone, which is an industrial instrumentation company. And I was in sales there and got degrees in engineering from different factories that offer education in that. So like I said, I've bounced around all over the place. But back to the theater part, I was friends with some attorneys that were actors, and they were looking for somebody to do file work about a day a week. And I've done a lot of contract working, so I had a lot of time between the different jobs going back and forth. And so once a week I was in there doing their file clerking. And then when they their secretary would go on vacation or that sort of thing, I would step into that position and do temp work there. I did temp, which was mostly homeowner association work to start with, also construction defect. Then they shared offices with divorce attorneys. So I subbed in there. So I worked with divorce attorneys for a while, and also a trust attorney and chapter 11. He did chapter 11. So I've worked for, and then all in all, 6 different law firms for different periods of time. It's mostly substituting in, but right now I'm working in real estate law, bankruptcy, and that's pretty much the focus right now.
Well, that's great. I love how we all come to this place on a journey, and there's a lot of different experiences that all of which we bring to our work in the law now, and it's really great to have that kind of background, the breadth of background. Okay, so now you both are working in this field. Jill, some of your work is kind of quasi-administrative, and some of it sounds like is definitely paralegal work. And Janet, you do paralegal work. Just talk for the audience for just a couple of minutes each about what kinds of work you're doing nowadays in a little more detail, if you would, please, Janet.
Certainly. Right now, I'm answering a lot of discovery, which is the litigation process of answering questions, propounding questions. And right now, that's been a little crazy during the pandemic. For some strange and unknown reason, we're getting hit with voluminous amounts of discovery. So you're getting like 150 requests for special interrogatories, 50 requests for admissions. I mean, it's just been crazy. I guess people have a lot of time, so they're propounding a lot of discovery. So we've been doing a lot of that. Obviously trial work, you have to balance the trial work with, your regular tasks that you're juggling for multiple attorneys. So you're always running around trying to find experts, draft discovery, and whatever else is needed at the moment.
Okay, you said the word juggling. I like that. It's a theme that we're going to come back to.
Yes.
Which is that in this field, you all have to very definitely, handle multiple things at once, multitask, if you will, but you really get good at that. Okay. So hold on one second. There we go. So let's see, Jill, what kinds of things are you working on these days in your office?
Well, unlike Janet, I've always worked for very, very small law firms, usually one attorney at a time, and or 2 at the most. And my work is pretty much just supporting them in whatever task that they're doing. They're one's doing consumer protection and the other, and bankruptcy, and the other one is doing more real estate. So it varies from time to time. a lot of what I do is typing and answering telephones and screening calls for the attorneys. I'm sort of the front line. I also do calendaring, which is often very time consuming. Trying to get 4 or 5 people in the same room at the same time is always a challenge with everybody's busy schedules. We also do a lot of talk. I talk a lot with the clients and try and reassure them to take stress off of them. We have a great deal of clients who are elderly, and they have properties and they have a lot of renters that aren't paying, and you're trying to reassure them and try to take a lot of stress off their lives. And so a lot of it is just a lot of hand holding.
So working with landlords, commercial property owners, landlords, residential landlords, dealing with their legal issues, sometimes preparing and filing legal documents, also
Yes.
complaints if you represent the plaintiff, things like that.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what I thought I'd do is just segue away for a second for our audience, in case some in our audience wonder, well, what exactly, what are some of the specific tasks that a paralegal can and cannot do? Because I teach, I have a PowerPoint. I promise it's short, and I promise that I'm not going to read it. How about that? If I read it, there should be sanctions involved. So this is our class here, A Day in the Life. And there we go. I like that bumper sticker. Honk if you like litigation. So we're just going to have a few more minutes talking briefly about this PowerPoint, and then we're going to get even more detail into what a typical day looks like for Janet and Jill, and some more about the cases they work on and what are the challenges and rewards of this kind of work. I just thought I'd share this screen here. This slide says, at least in the state of California where we are, the California Business and Professions Code defines what a paralegal is, which is somebody who has some specialized training or experience, work experience, who either is employed or contracts with an attorney or law firm or agency, and performs specifically delegated substantial legal work under the direction and supervision of a member of the bar. And so that's a key thing, that paralegals do have to work under supervision of an attorney. We don't ask paralegals to work independently. And here's a couple, again, itemization here of the types of things you guys do as paralegals. Interviewing clients and witnesses. That is something that you both do, and I want to talk more about that. Legal research. You both at times have had to do legal research. Is that correct?
Minimally. I mean, I can do some like jury verdict searches, but when it really gets to substantive case law, not so much on my end.
No, neither.
Okay, so sometimes paralegals are asked to do specific legal research or just preparing documents that you have to have familiarity with, analyzing or drafting legal documents such as discovery responses. Janet, you mentioned, Jill, you mentioned you have to file sometimes legal documents like a complaint in a lawsuit where you have worked on the document with the attorney's input and contribution. Would that be right?
Yeah.
Yep. Drafting outgoing discovery or responding to discovery. Again, discovery is the questions in writing that attorneys would prepare and send to each other. Requesting documents is one of the things. Asking the other side to admit certain facts and evidence. Taking depositions where you put people under oath and ask them questions, all of that, subpoenaing records. Janet and Jill, have you ever prepared the form of a subpoena to send that out, or have a document service handle a subpoena? Have you ever had to do that?
Oh, yes, on a regular basis.
Yeah, we for document subpoenas, we usually use a vendor, but then if you're talking about other kinds of subpoenas, that's a whole different animal.
Yeah, subpoena,
Yeah.
preparing a subpoena to get a witness to appear at a hearing
Yeah.
or trial, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, definitely that. Collecting and compiling evidence, documents, and sometimes recommending to the supervising attorney something based on the documents. Hey, I found the following information. I think this could be significant, right? There are
that's kind of a
times-
regular thing. Yeah, if we come across something during the course and scope of reviewing 35,000 pages of documents and say, hey, look at this. So yeah, it's definitely reviewing things and being on top of the case to bring things to their attention, or or if we need to ask additional special interrogatories on something. Yeah.
And I used to work in premises defense, liability defense for a large grocery store chain, and a lot of slip and falls, a lot of back injuries, that sort of thing. And I used to have to go through tons of medical records that were subpoenaed and locate any references to backs and pull out that information for the attorneys so that they don't have to look through all of the other exams that are included that
Yep.
nobody wants to read about, and narrow it down to pre-existing conditions rather than the tonsillitis that they had when they were 15.
Okay, that sounds familiar to me since that's the area that I worked in too. Thank you, Jill and Jan, on that. And then trial preparation, supporting the attorneys. Janet, I know, have done work to help attorneys prepare for trial, right?
And very time consuming. Yes, absolutely.
Very time consuming. And Jill, let's say you had a landlord who was going to bring an unlawful detainer or what we call an eviction action. In some cases, you had to work or have had to work with your clients preparing documents for that or preparing them for that.
This is correct. Yeah, getting copies of the lease agreements and checks, bounced checks, information, that sort of thing. Yes.
Very definitely. So those are some of the tasks you do. Let's talk about what you can't do under the law. The first one is you can't give legal advice under California law, right? You can't independently tell your client, well, here's what the law says, here's what I think you should do. And you can't represent your client in court, except under certain circumstances. There are administrative hearings like workers' compensation hearings, sometimes where paralegals can appear. You cannot select what document is the right document to use, say in court or in a certain situation. I don't think any of you ever have been cappers, runners, or ambulance chasers. Have you ever done that, either of you?
You
No?
haven't chased an ambulance recently, no.
That
No.
has not part of the job description. Thank you very
No.
much.
Not today.
Okay. Well, the business and profession code says you can't do it. So
Oh.
you can't do that. Here's one: engage in conduct that constitutes the unlawful practice of law. This is again some very specific things that you cannot do, but it has to do with not giving legal advice or representing somebody in court, especially. So those are the basic kind of things.
Can I say
go
something,
ahead.
Mr. Waterman?
Please go ahead.
Also, I know during the course and scope of working with clients, they'll ask you a lot of questions, and sometimes they'll think you're an attorney, and you have to be very aware of what they're asking you and how you're responding, so they're aware that you're a paralegal, you're not an attorney, because sometimes they kind of cross those things over, and you have to be very astute and very clear on who you are and what you're doing, because that gets blurred sometimes.
Yes, I think in our paralegal classes, we say you can't give legal advice. That's one thing you tell the client, and you tell them I'm a paralegal, not an attorney. So don't expect me to give you legal advice. However, you do convey questions
Yes.
brought by the clients to the attorneys and information back, so you can be a conduit. And I think you often are.
Yes.
On the front lines with the client. You hear things that the attorneys don't hear necessarily that can be very valuable, and you can pass that on and share it and in a meaningful way, I think, with the attorney. this chart just shows that we have the two systems, usually state court and federal court. You folks usually are working in the trial courts, which are in litigation in most states called the superior or circuit court or district court in the state court system, district courts in the federal court system, and then occasionally on the appellate level if you're working in an office that does do appellate work. And then we have these different phases of litigation. That's what I was going to end on. We have this sort of early evaluation or investigation where you're trying to figure out which end is up. You start the lawsuit if you're the plaintiff. The defendant gets involved and responds or files motions initially. Then we have this discovery phase Janet mentioned, sometimes law in motion where you get into disputes. Janet and Jill, you've sometimes had motions your attorneys have had to file where during this discovery phase, somebody isn't playing the game right and you have to come into court, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's correct. And generally with this, I know in our situation with the motions, and especially with what they call an ex parte, where you have to notify the client that you're doing, or the other party that you're doing things. Often it will be myself that will have to contact the client and say, we are going to be doing this on this date at this time. And then we have to write up a declaration. So a lot of times that's something that a paralegal, I think, would handle in a lot of cases, because they have to leave the phone call, they have to send the email, they have to note exactly what day and time that's been done and write it up for filing in the court system.
Indeed. We sometimes call that the meet and confer effort, where before you can come to court on a motion or certain matters, you have to say, well, I conferred and met with the opposing counsel and we tried to work this out, and here's what we agreed on, and here's what we didn't agree on. And here we are. So declarations for the attorney to sign, I think that's right. So I just wanted to have that little segue. Now, speaking of segues, let's move on to a couple of topics. One, I just was going to ask you about types of cases you work on, and you just started talking about that in detail. Sort of like, what is a typical day for you? If we talk about a typical day, it involves a lot of variety sometimes. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, for me, let's see, I have my billable hours, which you may or may not have. I happen to have billable hours. So this morning, what did I do? I contacted the client regarding discovery responses. I set out some, I had to cancel some experts and let everybody know that the case had settled, and cancel the record subpoenas. I drafted some supplemental interrogatory requests and some special interrogatories.
Which are those written questions from the attorneys to each other? Yep.
So I did that. What else did I do this morning? Oh, I did an IME demand for an independent medical evaluation. So I did that and drafted it and sent it out. And and we had another case that settled, and now I'm kind of answering some discovery. So it also depends on how many attorneys you work for. If you work for multiple attorneys, you're jumping from thing to thing to thing, and everybody wants their thing done first, and sometimes that doesn't work. So you have to really be able to juggle and manage. At one point I was working for 5 attorneys. Now I'm down to 2 attorneys. So, sometimes you just have to pick and choose and just tell them to kind of take a minute and wait, because you can only do so much at one time. I mean, you can only do so much at one time, but that's essentially what I'm doing today.
I was going to say, Mr. Waterman, Janet, you're on the Pacific Coast, correct?
Correct.
That's a very busy morning already.
Oh.
I was going to say, it's 2:00 my time. Oh my goodness, you got a
Well,
lot
that's just
done.
half my day.
Wonderful.
That is a long one. Jill, what lately, say, if you were to describe a day in the life, what kinds of things have you had to do?
Well, I'm a little bit lower on the level. I'm more of a legal secretary. She does a lot more work than I do. But I do a lot of typing and phone answering and making sure doing copies for exhibits for trials, and a lot of just general secretarial work. But I think a lot of it is just being organized, keeping the calendar set, handling the phones, and screening clients. If, is this a type of law that we handle versus not, and possibly giving suggestions of other attorneys to go to. But I'd say most of it is just being support to the attorney, whatever they need. Do I need, to email this person and answer this question, or handle billing questions and that type of thing. It's you're the front line. In my case, I'm the front line. I'm the one that answers the phones. I have to be able to multitask. I have to be able to be typing a document, answering an email, answering the telephone, running in when the attorney needs me, and not lose track of where all that is. So there's a lot of time management required, and a lot of being organized and not having multiple cases on my desk open at the same time for things to get mixed up in. So it's very specific. You just try to keep yourself neat. I'm also in the public because I'm the receptionist as well. So if somebody should come in, I don't like to have a lot of personal documents, confidential documents out for people to see. So there's a great deal of that. And I'm very good at turning my screensaver on immediately if somebody comes in, so that they can't oversee what's going on my screen. So it's a lot of dual processing of things.
Wow. A couple of themes came across there: juggling and multitasking for sure. As Emily mentioned in the chat, detail-oriented. This is a key component of your work, that you have a mindset of being focused on myriad types of details and pieces of information that you're working with. You also mentioned, if you're dealing with people in the public, that you have to maintain client confidentiality of records, because attorneys are under a duty to do that. Indeed. That's great, Jill and Janet. Thank you for sharing those things. The other thing I was going to ask you about was, you've talked a little bit about interacting with clients. That is something that is part of your work, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Both of you. And what is that like, interacting with attorneys as well as clients? I know you do both of those things. Talk to us about that. What is that like?
Well, on my end, and I also wanted to interject too, that there are just so many different paralegal things out there, that this is just a very small part of it. But for me, I think when the important thing is that you have to kind of know your attorney, because you're essentially an extension of the attorney. So when I'm doing things on behalf of the attorney, I have to know how they're going to respond, how they're going to handle it, how they're going to deal with it. And I'm the extension of that. And we'll deal with clients anywhere from the president of the company to a guy that's mopping the floors in the back. So you're dealing with people on a lot of different levels, and you will encounter the people that refuse to talk to you because they only speak with the attorney. And that is what it is. But you have to kind of, work it out with everybody, and be respectful and just put your best foot forward. And sometimes it's difficult because they think you're against them and adverse, and you have to convince them that you're on their side and you're there to help them, and they need to help you help them. And they don't always understand that component, which makes it a little difficult.
All I can think of is Tom Cruise in the movie Jerry Maguire, when he turns to Cuba Gooding and says, "Help me, help you." Sometimes attorneys have to, and paralegals have to convince their clients to be on their side.
Yeah.
Indeed. Jill, what's it like to interact with clients and other attorneys?
In our situation, it's not as, in my current situation, it's not as big a deal. Most everybody's in fairly good humor, other than going through the pandemic with all the landlords that are not getting paid for rent, and trying to explain to them what's going on with the state of California and some of the different counties. Even Alameda County right now is still not allowing anybody to go after rent or evict people who are not paying their rent because of COVID. It's a stressful thing for them. There are some that are elderly that they're being looked after fiduciaries, where they're in a say a mental home or a old folks home, and they're counting on renting their property to pay for their residency. And I mean, the situations get very, very sad at times, especially with elderly folks who have property that they're renting out. They've downsized, they're now in an apartment and they're renting out their major home and trying to get rent for that. So trying to ease that tension and do the best that you can to help them. But I've also worked in family law, and you have to have the attitude when you're going in with family law. You practically are a psychiatrist, a therapist in a lot of ways, because you're dealing with people under extremely stressful situations, divorce particularly, child parent struggles. I've been in law offices, and when it comes to Mother's Day and it happens to be the Father's weekend, and with the child and the fights that go on, you really have to be ready to deal with people in their worst emotional states. And when you're going into the field, you have to understand, okay, can I deal with the screaming parents? It's like, it's my weekend, and those fights. If you can't handle that, I don't recommend family law. And I couldn't take it. I try to avoid family law as a result, because it's very stressful. And the attorneys having to deal with that, God bless them. So there's that. And then the other side of it is also dealing with court clerks and the other attorneys. I find that recognizing who they are when they call, showing them a great deal of respect, but also a sense of humor and a sense of, how are you today, especially with the attorneys. I've had many attorneys say, it's always a pleasure to call your office. You're always so friendly and nice. They're not the enemy. They're doing their job. You're doing your job. And if you have a relationship where the attorneys on the other side like your office, like you, when you say, I need 2 weeks extension to answer discovery, they're more likely to go, sure, no problem. And so you don't ever want to treat them like they're the enemy. You're just in a business situation, and it's a negotiation. It's a business negotiation. You must show respect. You must show, compassion as a human being to a human being. If you find out they've had COVID or something like that, you need to reach out and say, I'm so sorry. I hope you're feeling better. And always act, try to be good about remembering who people are. That's the other thing. When they call, say, you smiling, oh, hi, it's you. You get that, whether it be client or attorney or mediator, it's a pleasure to talk to you. And you need to show that in your voice and on your face, because that comes across on the phone. And I think that's really important for the relationships between law firms and the folks that you have to work with.
I think that's an excellent point, that you are the face of the office to many people, the clients, the court staff, opposing counsel in litigation, or other clients that you interact with. That's excellent. Good point. Emily, you mentioned that there are a couple of questions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mhm,
Couple of
please.
questions in the Q&A. So we'll start with that, and then we'll see if there's any other things that pop up as well too. I just wanted to say, just as a personal note, learning about these two different areas, paralegal areas. Kind of sounds like you're the glue that holds it all together. So just going to go ahead and say that piece. Now, the question in the Q&A is, what type of credentials, professional development, or excuse me, let me start over. What type of credentials or professional development is helpful for a career being a paralegal?
That's a great question for both Janet and Jill. I will say that, not to just to plug JFK, but we are a ABA certified approved paralegal program at JFK. And so we have a very specific set of requirements we have to meet in training and in education. So we do meet that, and we're very proud of that. Janet, you went to before JFK started our paralegal program, St. Mary's University had that program in California, and you went there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I found that you want to choose an ABA certified program because a lot of jobs I applied for wanted that ABA certification. Otherwise, that door was closed. So absolutely, when you're looking for a program, you want that certification. Above and beyond getting your paralegal certificate from an ABA program, there is also a certified paralegal designation. I'm not quite sure how that runs in different states. I really don't know if there's any pros or cons for or against it. I guess it depends in the realm in which you're working, whether that would really apply. However, prior to this, if you didn't have that additional certification, you didn't have to do continuing education, continuing legal education. But now apparently in California, we now have to do that, because just in the last few months, we were told we have to have so many, I think 20 credits a year or some 20 units a year. So that's another component.
I was just going to ask Jill to comment, because I will say that there are certainly many people working in this field that have not been certified or went through an ABA school. There's a lot of on-the-job training, and I think Jill, Jill and Janet, both of you have learned a tremendous amount from work. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm totally on the job. I have no official formal education, and I have, like I said, I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater. But it's a humanities degree from Santa Clara University. But I've been working in the field, starting, like I said, as a file clerk and moving my way into secretarial work over the last 25 years. So I've been doing it a long time.
Indeed. And Janet, you got a lot of training when you worked for the corporate side before working now in the insurance defense tort litigation side.
That was a learning curve.
I was going to say, in both the cases, you've received tremendous amount of training on the job.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I started out in the corporation, and then when I jumped into family law, that was pretty much on the job training. They figured, okay, well, you went through the program, you worked at a paralegal, you'll figure this out. And that was okay. But then jumping into litigation, it's like, whoa, that was a big learning curve. I wasn't used to all the deadlines and the calendaring, and so that took a little time. But once again, I had the background behind me that they considered me for this position.
And I, just to top it off for the question, I would say the combination of gaining the legal working experience as a paralegal in a law firm or agency or an office, combined with sometimes taking classes if you want to, and if you want to go through the certified paralegal program, you can get some sort of breadth that you may not have experienced before, but by no means do you have to have that to work in this field. I think it's an extra added bonus in terms of your employability when you're out looking. It can really help you too. I hope that helps.
So thank you so much for answering that question. What I think is really interesting is that you've mentioned, and you've already set the stage for this, that these paralegal positions are kind of slivers of different portions of law. And what I enjoy that our audience members can learn today, obviously Janet with the ABA cert route, and then Jill with the on-the-job training route. It's just interesting to see that there's different ways that you can get to the same space. So thank you for sharing that and your experiences. One more question in the Q&A.
Sure,
And
please.
I know, Mr. Waterman, we touched on this, but I was hoping maybe they could expand just a tad bit more. Or maybe you, Mr. Waterman, but do paralegals spend time in the actual courtroom? And I know we touched on it, but.
Well, I'll offer something, and Jill and Janet can too. I was a trial attorney myself in majority of my career, so it would be a luxury to have a paralegal with me in trial. I will say that I would have loved that. The majority of the time I didn't. But these days, with technology in the courtroom being what it is, it can be extremely valuable and helpful for an attorney to have someone at least part of the time, if not full time, depending on the case and the size of it and complexity, to have a paralegal there, not only helping with things like running, PowerPoints or running exhibits up on the screen, which is not so easy to find. Also dealing with witnesses can be very taxing, independent witnesses, preparing demonstrative aids in the courtroom. There are so many things that paralegals do helping attorneys in trial, I will say that. These days, even more so maybe than in the past. So Janet or Jill, have you ever had the experience of helping somebody run something out to an attorney in court or come to court and do something for them?
Well, my experience for the most part has been running something to court. I need this, I need that. Can you bring this down? I do know they want us to actually be in the courtroom more often with the attorney. However, with our caseload and our workload, we can't always facilitate that. I think it would be fun. I think it would be interesting. But when you're dealing with multiple attorneys, you can't just drop everything for 3 or 4 other attorneys and go to trial for the one attorney. So and once again, it's a lot of juggling and managing. And but so far for me, it's just been running back and forth to the court on occasion.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jill?
Well, working for a single or double attorneys, nope, I stay home and answer the phone. So I have to cover the office. So no, I don't ever go in.
I was going to say that, I mean, depending on the size of the case, if you're on some very large patent infringement case or some complex business litigation or complex personal injury case, whatever the case may be, the bigger the case, the more the chances are that an attorney could be working with a paralegal actually in court in a trial setting.
Yeah.
I think that is very realistic. But as I say, the attorneys become masters of none, but jack of all. They have to learn to deal with technology in the courtroom. I would have my own, the old-fashioned way, blow-ups of exhibits on hard panels, and we would bring those in the courtroom. So there's different ways of doing things, kind of the old school way and the new school. But either way, I think attorneys having the benefit of working with paralegals, even if they're not in the courtroom, they're behind the scenes doing many things to prepare. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I really appreciate your input on that. Obviously, different experiences depending on the role. But one last question I see that's popped up in the Q&A, and again, attendees, if you do have any other questions, please let us know. Is there ever, is anybody ever overqualified if you have a couple of master's degree and you're working on some law school? Is there something that would be holding you back from being overqualified to be a paralegal, is the question.
That's a great question. It doesn't come up too often, but these days people have interest in many things and may have multiple degrees. Jill and Janet, what do you think about that? Can you ever be overqualified?
I would say no. Right now, one of our paralegals she's waiting to pass the bar, and she's taken it a couple of times, and she's just, hoping she's going to pass the bar, and she's working as a paralegal. And she may just continue to work as a paralegal. We've even had a paralegal in the past that was an attorney, but she didn't want to be an attorney. She was more comfortable being a paralegal. So I would say no, but you could certainly, that experience, you could certainly take it a lot of places. And with the educational background, I think that would just open you up to a multitude of opportunities.
Yes, I agree. Jill, overqualified?
I don't see why, if that's what you're in, if you've done all this other stuff and you decide that that's what you want to do, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be doing paralegal work. I know a lot of attorney or people who've gone through law school. One of the attorneys that I work for was a husband and wife team. He got passed his bar. She went through law school. They met in law school. She was a paralegal, and she just never bothered to take the bar exam. She didn't particularly feel that she needed to be the attorney in the house. She let her husband do it, and then she had babies and could be out of the office with that. And now she's teaching art history. But yeah, I don't see why, having a great deal of education and having been a professional student, as they call them, why, if you're enjoying doing what you're doing, you can. I don't think the overeducation is a problem.
I would say that, yes, I've had a student in one of my paralegal classes, several students that have gone through the JD program, and for various reasons, for some periods of time, they don't want to take the bar, or they rather practice work as paralegals. And they have all this experience. They've gone to law school. Wonderful. When Jan and I worked together for a while, there was a paralegal who was in the same situation, that had gone to law school, had not either taken or passed the bar, and then took it and decided not to work as a lawyer for quite a period of time. And this person was fabulous because she knew the background on the law, and it was.
Yeah, she was amazing with research. Absolutely.
Couldn't have been better.
She passed the bar in 2 states.
She ended up taking the bar and passing in 2 states, but she had this sort of backstop of working as a paralegal for a number of years, which ended up helping her, I think, a lot in her career, because she just had a background that you can't get in law school, actually, because you've been in practice.
Right.
So I think working in this field, whether before going to law school, during or after, is a good thing. Or if you don't want to go to law school, you don't have any ambition to do that, it's still a wonderful area to work in. That was my kind of concluding thing. I was going to ask, if it's okay, Emily, I wanted to ask Jill and Janet both, what do you enjoy most from your work, and would you recommend it to others? If you could wrap up on those 2 things, one or both.
Okay. Well, needless to say, the deadlines and the stress and the caseloads and working for multiple attorneys is rough, but fender benders do get a little boring. Slip and falls do get a little boring, but when you have a federal employee that shot himself in the leg, that gets a little more entertaining. We had someone buried in the wrong plot. That was very interesting. The mortuary cases have been quite entertaining. I hate to say that, but they're very interesting. I'm now dealing with a case involving a skunk. Yes, a skunk. So you just really never know what's going to come up. I mean, you have your basic everyday, activities and boring things, but then you get these things out of the blue, like how does a pizza oven work and the mechanics behind a pizza oven? Who knew? So you just never know what may come up in the day.
Perfect. Jill.
I agree with her on that. What I do now is not as diverse as that. I found that premises liability was much more entertaining. There's lots of crazy stories that we have had with that. But it is a variety. You're doing different things, different days, different types of things. Sometimes you're doing research, sometimes you're doing reading and proofreading and that sort of thing. And I think that the variety in the day is nice. You're not, not plugging the same thing into this cog. at a factory or that sort of thing. So I enjoy it. I enjoy working with the people. If you're a people person, I think it's a great field. You get to a variety of folks that you can talk to, and yeah, I think it's great. But some types of law are certainly more entertaining than others, I would say.
I would echo that too. Dealing with people, because each case is different and the people are different, I think adds to a lot of the variety. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And
100%.
I've had some really, really great clients over the years, and I miss them when they're gone and hope they never have to call us again at the same time.
I can't help but mention that when Jen and I worked together, Janet was new on the job and she laughs. So this case involved a client that owned this wharf facility, and there was a fire there. And we were working on some litigation over who caused the fire and who's responsible for all this damage on this wharf. So it turns out Janet's new on the job, and she has to go through about 3 or 4 shipping containers worth of documents, and they were in not necessarily, appetizing conditions, shall we say. It was
Dusty,
not
rats,
dusty,
yeah, all kinds of stuff.
It really was bad. So I was worried Janet was going to quit after 3 days of being out there. So after about 3 or 4 days, we take the documents back and we start going through them. And lo and behold, we found this old pre-existing easement document that was pre-existing the parties in this case that turned out pivotal. It was a pivotal piece of evidence, and it turned the entire case around for us. So I think sometimes the fun thing about doing the investigation side of this, which sometimes you have to do in litigation, is you find the unexpected, and it makes you feel good when you do find that. And when you tell your client, well, this is a case we're going to win most likely. And, Jen and I were out there, and after 4 days, we found this document that we didn't think existed. And lo and behold, look at this. So sometimes you surprise your clients with your joint effort between the work of the paralegal and the legal assistant and the attorney working as a team. So I think that's a wonderful point maybe to end on.
Absolutely.
Any other comments, either of you and Emily, if there's any other last question?
I don't see any other last questions at this time. Jill, Janet, any other last thoughts here?
I would say if you're on the edge, jump in. It's really entertaining, interesting work, and you can go to so many places and do so many different things, types of law. It's not just isolated to one specific discipline.
Wonderful.
As I tell clients when they call in and they want a type of law that we don't handle, it's like, well, it's like you're asking us to an eye doctor to pull your tooth. It's very much like the medical field. Everybody specializes in so many things that there's a huge variety of different types of law that you can be involved in, and each aspect of that is going to be completely different. I mean, we didn't even touch on criminal. None of us have done criminal, and my goodness, that's got to be exciting at times. Not my kind of deal, but it's got to be somebody else's kind of deal. So, there's a lot of different types of lawyers and different, and it's every office is going to be very different, and every job within that office is different.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you, Janet. And I did want to say thank you so much, Mr. Waterman, for bringing forward this webinar about learning what it's like to be a paralegal for a day. And I absolutely think it's going to be a great resource for our students. And I'm super grateful that they took the time out of their work days to come and share this information with us as well. I'd like to thank our attendees for asking some great questions and attending our webinar today. And until the next time, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.